Hello and welcome to the Heads and Volleys podcast with me, Lee Dunn. This episode is about game models, and it came off of the back of the conversation I held previously with Paddy King. So I'm bringing him back into the fray here and to discuss really what a game model is, how you go about creating that, what that really looks like, how to use certain moments of the game and build them into a conversation with your players. We touch on some professional feedback with regards to players that really look for some kind of guidance, and that's really what your game model is going to be. It's going to be giving your players, giving your coaching staff, if you're lucky enough to have coaching staff, it's giving everybody a roadmap. It's giving everybody a pathway on which to follow. So now your players are looking and considering what they're looking to do every time they get the ball or what objectives they're looking to achieve in each part of the field. So huge thank you to Paddy for coming back on and sharing his knowledge and his insight. You can, of course, always find him, King8Paddy on Twitter. So without further ado, here we go. We're going to jump straight into a revisit with Paddy regarding game models. Start at, I guess, the 10,000 foot level of a style of play and then kind of build into some constants that you're looking for from your players and kind of what that looks like for players and for practices. So I think that might be really interesting, especially now it's beginning of the year, technically beginning of the soccer year, and we're looking for coaches to be super organized and super ready for a coming season. So I think it'd be good to get a structure that someone can effectively take away for themselves and begin to work into what they want to see. And hopefully their clubs already have that sort of stuff, but I don't know how many clubs are organized enough to have that layout set, you know?
I think you're right. Yeah, absolutely. If you were to say to me, you can have a game model or a curriculum, I'd always go for a game model because that's your overarching roadmap, principles, direction, and you can, although that is subjective, once you've set that, then your session plans or your curriculum is a subjective as well, because I might prioritize playing out the back, right, as a huge part of my game model, but you and I might go about that in different ways, and we might even go about it in the same way, but we'll coach it through different methodologies. I might be a huge rondo fan. The Pep Guardiola 4v4 plus 3 rondo for playing out the back, I think is phenomenal, right? But you might go, no, I'm more about pattern play. I want to get these guys, I want to get my goalkeeper, my back four, and my six, just stroking that ball around, and then I'm going to layer in a couple of defenders, like the Atletico sort of 4-4-2 press, and then I'm going to add in that midfield four against them, and I'm going to do it that way. So that's all up for grabs, I think. But once you've got your game model down, I think, if you've got good coaches and good coach educators and you know how to work on the principles of that game model, I think the sessions almost become not irrelevant, but they play second fiddle heavily. And I know a big part of the thing, and my book has a curriculum in it because that's the sessions that I personally use. But I know a lot of people peddle that kind of stuff. And I'm throwing myself under the bus there by saying it, because that's obviously that is in my book. But I think people say this is what they say, this is like the one-size-fits-all curriculum. But I don't know if there is such a thing. But for me, my game model, this is how I coach it, but it evolves every day. I'm a coach that works for me. We just appointed him director of our coaching methodology. He's in Ireland doing his B license. He's going to get back next week, and we're ripping into the game model, we're ripping into the curriculum and session plans and kind of overhauling it, and it'll be version like 5.0, 6.0, and it's I don't think you can sit here and say this curriculum is the way to do it. I think you need your game model, then you work backwards, and if you want a curriculum, great. If your coaches are maybe not very good, right, maybe volunteers and blah blah blah, not that volunteer means they're not very good, but maybe they're more volunteer basis and don't have the time for it, then maybe they need a curriculum. If you're pulling in a bunch of guys from, an academy or something, you should probably be able to give them a game model and ensure they understand that, and then they can probably go off and design their own sessions around that. So,
I think there's so much influence out there for what determines what people are looking at for a game model, right? So it seems to be a lot of trending. So you look at a certain style of way or of playing, for example,
Yeah.
the Dutch way, or there's the Barcelona way, the Pep way. There's all these kind of disciples of different styles, and I think that becomes a game model for a lot of people, right? So
Yes.
they then begin to say, okay, that's how we're going to play. Now, to your own personal experience, what's kind of shaped and influenced your decision for your game models?
So without a shadow of a doubt, it is my love of all things Barcelona. Um, and I know it's probably gone past the stage where it's cool to say that, because Barcelona was everything for a while and everyone was jumping on the bandwagon, and now people talk about random teams that I've never heard of, right? Some Dutch, level 2 team, because they do this very, that they have their centre backs overlapping and cutting back. Or Leeds is very popular now, right? Everyone loves Leeds because Bielsa's there, and they play some brilliant football. They really do. But for me, the time of life that I got into seriously thinking about becoming a coach was around 2008, when Pep was full swing with Barcelona. They played some of the most amazing football I've ever seen. And growing up, although I'm a West Ham fan and whatnot, I wasn't that into it. I was into it because my dad was into it, and I was born in London, and all my schoolmates were into it, West Ham, Arsenal, whatever, Tottenham. But the football was pretty poor, and West Ham went up and down the division, so you never really saw them on TV. So when Barcelona came along, 1992, I think I saw one of the first Champions League games, and it was Milan versus Barcelona, and it kind of piqued my interest. And then 2008 comes along, and I really made the change full time. Now I still love West Ham, but Barcelona just opened my eyes to something different I had not seen before, which I now know is probably positional play. I also got married in Barcelona. I met my wife in Barcelona, so it's just a huge part of our family. It's just undeniable for us. Our family is sort of entrenched in Barcelona. Inextricably linked, and I think we'll probably end up retiring there when we're rich enough, if that day ever comes. But it was Pep's Barcelona that sort of opened my eyes to it. And I played football all my life. I played at school. I used to play for a club called Senrab in London, which, if you have a minute, Google them. They've produced some world-class, famous English players over the years, typically, London players and stuff. But I didn't really enjoy the way I was coached. I didn't think there was any thought to it. I'm a bit of an overthinker. I need to understand reasons behind things, and I just thought coaching was just put some cones down and off you go. And then you see this style of play that is so methodical, but without being robotic. It was brave, it was courageous, and they had some of the best players in the world implementing it, the best coach, in my opinion, in the world directing it. And that kind of led me, probably in around 2011, to try and put together what would have been my first attempt at a game model. And I very quickly realised I didn't have a clue how to do that. There's so many infinite variables in soccer, and I hadn't really given it enough thought. I was just overexcited by the thought of this sort of new methodology or this new philosophy. Fast forward years later, years of coaching it, working in it, watching it, observing it, analysing it, questioning it, reading about it, looking up other people that are into positional play or JDP, whatever you want to call it. I soon realised that this, in my opinion, is the only way to coach. But you can't just go and make it up. You need a common set, a core set of values or beliefs or methodological instructions on how you're going to go and do that. And again, fast forward a few years after that, I discover something called a game model, which I first came across through tactical periodization. I have trouble saying the guy's name, Vitor Frade, I think is how you say it, but he's the father of modern soccer football periodization. And I read a few books on it, and they kept referring to this game model. So did my own research and found out what a game model was, and it kind of all grew from there.
And so do you think that your preference for that style of play is deeply reflected in your personality?
I think you're probably right. I would also say a huge part of my personality doesn't like any kind of chaos. So I'm not boring, I promise you, but I do like things to be quite organised. That part of my personality likes the order that positional play gives you. You, at any given time, based on where you are, there's a principle that tells you what you should be doing. And it's not fixed, and it's not rigid. It's a principle probably rather than a rule, but it allows you to remain calm and kind of always figure something out in the moment, and all the players around you working together to figure that same thing out. So I think you're absolutely right, mate, when you say, does it appeal to my personality and my character? I think 100%. I don't think I could play. Now, football's got to be the most random game ever, right? 22 moving parts. I try to kind of de-randomise it. I like that kind of de-randomisation, if that's even a word, of putting it all back to these principles of knowing at any given time where things should be, how they should happen. It doesn't always work, right? But that's the trick of coaching, I guess, to make all those things happen as often as possible with more frequency, higher frequency. So yeah, I think my personality, I'm just attracted to that style of play. It's obviously proved hugely successful with arguably the best team of all time, unless you're maybe that Brazil team from the 70s, you might say was Pep's 2008 to 2012 Barcelona team.
It's so valuable to believe in what you do, right? So then I guess my idea on that is somebody that may be listening that is maybe heard about game model in our first chat, and it's kind of piqued an interest, and I've had a couple of people ask about how do I figure that out, what am I looking for? And that was kind of the reason for that question, of finding out if it's part of your personality, if it's part of your DNA, if it's something that you can look and think, I really like that, I love everything about that. And that's clearly how that's happened for you. So then when you thinking about your pathway, the stuff you did for the Red Bulls, and then I guess even any other coaching that you've done where you haven't necessarily been in control or in charge, how do you go about kind of working your own style or your own kind of game model within a greater, I guess we would call it a game model, within a greater organization? And I think of some of the large coaching organizations in the US, where I was with somebody last week and they have over 200 teams, and
Right.
They have what they would call a defined game model or a defined style of play, but then nobody can implement that over 200 teams and 200 coaches. And so I wondered, and they asked if they were kind of going against the grain by doing some of their own thing. And I just wonder how you've faced that, where you've been in an environment where maybe it's not been your preferred style, and how you deal with that.
So you're absolutely right. I don't know how you would really ingrain a game model over 200 teams or 50 coaches or whatever. Although, I mean, my club, we're up around 30 plus coaches, and it's a struggle, but it's a struggle we do try and make work, even though it's difficult. At Red Bulls, so I think on our previous chat together, I told you how much I loved my time at Red Bulls and how valuable it was. However, you're right, I wasn't in charge. I wasn't setting the curriculum or the methodology, and their methodology was really about technical work and lots of repetition, which is simple and effective. But they weren't really involved in any kind of tactical application, certainly until kids were kind of hitting 14, 15. And even at those ages, there was no cohesive game model at all. So it was whatever the coach's individual preference were. So the coach would be tasked. The Red Bulls did provide curriculums if you wanted them, or you could make your own ones. But you had to submit everything, and so you couldn't just make up any old nonsense. But it was very disjointed from one coach to the next, from one team to the next in the same club, from one team to the next. You had the same coach in the same club. It could all be different. And that was probably the only philosophical difference I had with Red Bulls. Not an argument, just a difference of opinion. I personally don't understand and don't think it's possible for you to be a coherent, logical, stair-step approach coach if you don't have a common reference point, and that common reference point would be your game model. So if you're a guy who is turning up on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with random sessions, okay, they might be great sessions and the kids might learn from them and they might achieve a certain amount of results. But what you're absolutely not able to do there is to get across or embed a playing style, or people use philosophy and DNA, and it sounds very highfalutin language, but that is what it is, right? A philosophy, a style, a way of doing things. You cannot coach that, or you cannot coach that as effectively if you are coming to the field with random, disjointed sessions all the time. If you don't have that common game model to fall back on, then there's no way you can ever get teams to play a certain way. There's always going to be way more kind of random elements and doing things out of necessity than there are following a prescribed game plan. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong or the only way, but if I think back to any other area of teaching or coaching or management, you always have something that you work from. They probably won't call it a game model, but in school, if you're a teacher, you have something that you're trying to achieve. And I'm not talking about a curriculum or a syllabus. In terms of how you want a young person to leave your school, they come in at 11 and they leave at 18. How you want them to have been taught, what you want them to have been taught, and how you want them to be able to interact with in the world when they leave. Well, if you're just throwing random stuff at them, we're going to do what 2 + 2 is today, and tomorrow we're going to work on something that Shakespeare said, and okay, well, it's just random, isn't it? And there's no cohesion there. Well, it's the same in soccer. Why wouldn't it be? So if you're trying to build a model of what someone looks like, or what a team looks like after you've had them for a certain period of time, I can't envisage a way of doing that without having a game model to refer back to, and not just for the coach, but for the players as well. So for our club, or at least my team, because they're of a certain age, I will share extracts of the game model, slightly watered down because they are busy, they've got a lot of schoolwork, and you don't want to take away too much of their time, but a sort of watered down version of our game model. We'll have classroom sessions on it, so they see it and they can touch it, rather than just thinking they're getting a random coaching session again tonight, and where does it all lead. They can put this idea together so they know that sort of 2 + 2 will equal 4, and they can kind of get ahead of the game and start to speed up their learning. And I just think that's the best and most cohesive way to do it. Also, if you don't have a game model, then how can you hammer home your philosophy? Because you're not coaching to anything, you're just coaching. And we're going to work on striking today, or finishing, which is hugely important. But how are you going to finish? Where are you going to get your deliveries from? Where do your deliveries come from in a game? Where do you want them to come from? Is your game model based on wingers getting down the sides and hoofing a big cross into the box? Or are you looking for your fullbacks to provide width and allow your wingers to invert and dribble 1v1 so that they're in the box? And now it's a little cutback, so it's going to be like a little side foot finish rather than a big headed finish. So you need to know what you're going to teach. And I think you can only do that if you have a relatively coherent game model. It doesn't need to be as big and comprehensive as mine, because I packaged it up and sold it. It might be 10 pages on the 4 moments of the game and approximately what principles you want to follow in each of them. I think you've got to have something.
And I just to kind of, I completely agree with you in sharing it with your players, whether you are asking them for their buy-in or you're asking them for their own thoughts on it. And I think it'd be an interesting test for any coach to reach out to their players and say, for example, in these 4 moments of the game, what are we trying to do? Give me 1 or 2 things that we're trying to do, because that would effectively be your game model and your style of play, right? So,
Yep,
we are in attack. What do we try and do? And then I love when you have this pathway labeled out. And you said earlier, when you have it set out, you're not necessarily looking for a practice. You're not Googling attacking with width soccer practice. You already know what you want it to look like, and then you begin to create your own practice in that, and it typically looks like a game, and there's a certain style of play that you're asking your players to fulfill. I hear a constant debate about is, do you coach within a plan or do you coach reactive to the game at the weekend? But you can follow both, because you can address moments from the game within your overall game model, because we're just not quite achieving what we're set out to do, right?
Yeah, and I hear this a lot as well, and you get some people who are really really on one side of the fence or the other. There's no middle ground here. I think I agree with what you said. So there'll be games where we absolutely fly and we haven't put a foot wrong, and the following training session is just following the curriculum. I'm not good enough of an analyst to find anything wrong with that or to improve on it. I was just happy to watch that game at the weekend. You did very well. Let's go back to the session that was scheduled months and months ago. Then there's times where your guys get opened up like Christmas, right? And they can't. It just seems like the other team's got 15 players on the field, and everything's going wrong. And then I think on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I am going to work on some of those things. I'm going to sit down over the weekend, have a beer, think about why those things happened, and try and analyze it as best as I can and try and fix it during the week. Now, it might be that you would have covered stuff like that in your game model and your curriculum down the line anyway, but if you got so badly exposed that you need to address it right away, then I do. And here's another thing, right? My boys are 14 years old, they're not 8. So with 8-year-olds, would I really care? Probably not. I want those guys to carry on their learning and not have a knee-jerk panic reaction to anything that happened at the weekend. But I don't think there's anything wrong as you get up the ladder, and you're probably talking in terms of age and level now, of saying, hey guys, look, what happened at the weekend here? And did you see what I saw? And, yeah, coach, we got opened up, and all right, well, how do we adjust that within our game model? Maybe the reason we got opened up is because of our game model, right? We're an attacking team. We throw the kitchen sink forward, and hey, we are going to get opened up. So maybe we need to work on our transition. Maybe we don't need to move anyone around. Maybe we just need to work on our transitional moments and prevent those kind of long passes into the open spaces being made in the first place. And that is something that's in our game model, but you know what, we haven't embedded that down enough. So I'm going to skip forward 3 weeks, and we're going to work on some really heavy transitional based session. Got an example on the weekend, guys, that they ripped us apart. We need to shut this down and make sure that in order to play this beautiful style of risky, courageous football that we play, unless you want to go back to defending and being sort of sat back like a Mourinho team typically was, you want to get forward and get on the ball, well, then we have to put in the work in the transition, so then everything gets back to normal. But no, I think that's a great question, and something that I hear a lot, and I'd be very reluctant to say one way or the other, but that's how I do it. But then that's specific to the age of team I have and the level of team I have as well. I am capable or able to do that with them.
So let me ask you, can you give me a, for example, talking about the 4 moments. So for those who are unfamiliar, it's when we have the ball, we're in attack, or we don't have the ball, we're defending. And then the 2 transition moments where we transition from defense to attack, so we've won the ball, or we transition from attack to defense and we've lost the ball. Now we need to defend. So simply there, let's go on the example you started talking about there in terms of moving into transition. So clearly we're talking about attack. We've got the ball. What would one of your principles be for your team's play when you have the ball? You're looking to create width. Is there a specific line that your players know and know that off by heart?
Yeah, so it's not perfect right now. I've only had this team for about 8 months. Common principles in possession. I'm looking to get these guys to get a player on the ball in between a line or in a channel or off to the side as a free man, free receiver, free person, whatever you want to call it. All right. I'm blessed with a team that has very technical players, very smart players. They can hold the ball under pressure, and I know not all teams can do that. So this style doesn't suit all teams, but our boys will be able to hold the ball pretty much wherever on the field. They know how to play out of pressure. They know how to drop it back. They know they don't have to go forward all the time. And what they're looking to do is disrupt or disbalance the defence to such a degree where they maybe tilt it on an angle or just kind of knock it off kilter, draw someone in, make someone panic and jump from their defensive slot. And then as a team, they're actively hunting for this free player and they're looking for it constantly, to the point where sometimes we'll make a lot of mistakes and we'll miss obvious opportunities because they're still learning this process, right? So we'll look to get a guy in behind the line, and once we've achieved that, if you take everything else out of it, like results and goals, for me, if I can get our boys on the ball, in between lines, running at players, that's like a huge check in the box. That's, if I can get them up over halfway with a player on the ball, in space, facing the opposition, the rest of it, I mean, it's not magic, or it's not pixie dust, but the rest of it, you've got a much higher chance of scoring or doing some damage if you can get into that position in the first place than if you're just a random kick and chase team. So that is probably our most pressing principle, if you want to call it that. The other game principles are fairly common and familiar to everyone. Width and depth in attack. So that's both forward width, so offensive depth and depth underneath the ball. So one thing we look to do is keep the ball where we can. And a very, 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 very easy quick fix, which not a lot of coaches pick up on, and I do reference it in the book a bunch of times because I think it's so simple. I even tweet about it. And if you can get players with offensive depth underneath the ball, so when you have the ball, you've got people behind you that are capable of receiving that ball. When it all goes belly up, when it all goes wrong, instead of just panicking and losing the ball in a 1v1 or throwing it forward, if you can just drop it backwards or diagonally backwards or even sideways and then go again, right? Reorganize offensively. Okay, that didn't work. The reference point now, the ball is over here. It was over there, right? It's with the left centre back. It's now with the right centre back. Everyone reshape. Everyone reorganize. Let's go again. Let's probe. Let's try and get that ball into someone's feet and draw players towards them. And maybe the space isn't there, but if we recycle the ball quickly now, it will open up somewhere else. I can tell you, even at the level I'm coaching at, which is not development academy, which isn't professional academy in England, it's just a very good level travel club. People struggle. They might outmuscle us, right? We're only 13, so you 14, you're only 13 years old. They might outmuscle us every now and again. They might outrun us or whatever it is and seize on a mistake, but we outplay every team we come against without a shadow of a doubt.
Because they have an idea of what they need to be doing every time they have the ball.
I think so. I don't think it's random. I don't think it just happened by magic. I think it's somewhere in that realm of repetition through pattern play and repetition through principles. And we do a very small amount of pattern play for complicated movements. I mean, you're talking less than 5% of the entire season, less than 5%. And the rest of it is positional games, which might mirror this pattern play, but with now real-time oppositions and smaller spaces and blah, 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 blah. That, coupled with the game model, coupled with sharing the game model with them, allows these guys to go, okay, this isn't a playbook, it's principles. And I trust all these guys around me that they've moved in the right kind of space when I have the ball. And when they have the ball, I'll do the same kind of movements for them. That whenever I'm in trouble, there's usually an option that I can go. Rather than lose the ball, I can keep the ball and fight another day, right? Take another route on it. And I think that doesn't happen by chance.
No, absolutely. To go back to the brief discussion we had versus game reaction coaching versus staying within your model and within your own curriculum, now you have something that you're looking at. And many people that are coaching may or may not watch multiple games like you and I do at a weekend, and may not have an idea about some of the trends that are happening within games or some of the nuances that happen. But if you have a specific that you're looking for from your players, if, for example, you've worked on a cycle for the last 4 weeks on such play like that, for example, players finding space between the lines as a simple principle, now you have something that you're reviewing during the game at the weekend, and you're not suddenly saying, oh my goodness, we missed 5 shots, we need to work on shooting, but actually perhaps you're shooting from distance because your players aren't in between the lines to progress the ball further forward. So now you're staying true to your own plan and your own model, and you're also reacting probably appropriately more so for what's happening week in and week out.
So that ties in very nicely with the brief conversation we had about, if you had to have one or the other, a game model or a session plan, and how do you design your session plans? Well, for me, it's always a game model. So if you're saying at the weekend with a nice bit of smart analysis, well, we didn't score from those 5 shots because we were too far from goal and we were shooting under pressure because we hadn't received in space, which is part of our game model. Well, then you're right. You talk about session design now and reacting to a game as opposed to just sticking with the curriculum. Well, you're still sticking with your game model, but what you might do on Tuesday afternoon then is run a session that involves your back 4, maybe with your 6 and goalkeeper, trying to hold the ball under pressure, maybe from a 2 or a 3 press, penetrate into your 8 and 10. And you might decide this however you want, but you might say, well, I don't want those guys coming too short because I like to get my players up and high and all that kind of stuff. It's going to cause problems to the opposition. So I'm going to put a little halfway line in and tell the 8 and 10 they can't drop this side of that, and that the back 4 and the 6 have to be able to cope with whatever press I put on them without the help of the 8 and 10. But at some point, I want you to unbalance that defence enough so that you can fire through a little ball into the 8, into the 10, get on the half turn. You've got the fullbacks going up into the ball, maybe you've got a 9 dropping in, and now we're connecting, and we're up over halfway, and now we're connecting with attacking players. Because I've identified this as a problem area at the weekend, rather than just going, well, we didn't score, so we're going to work on shooting. I read someone said something to me the other day. It's probably poorly written by me because you only have a certain amount of words on Twitter, isn't it? He said there's no such thing as a technical session. All 4 elements of the game should be worked in one activity, and I agree with the principle. It's not always as easy to work that, especially if you're working on something very specific, but generally I would agree with that. So and we might be right, we didn't finish our shots properly on the weekend, but the root cause of that was deeper. But what I might do then, or I would try to do, is allow those 8 and 10 and the fullbacks and whoever else I add into that dynamic to finish with a realistic shot on goal, right? So I am working everything that I noticed from my analysis from the weekend, but primarily I'm trying to get those guys, the 8 and the 10, to receive in space, to connect and go forward with 9, or if it's the 11 and 7 that we're using, if we're asking our 9 to drop in maybe as a false 9 and the 11 and 7 to push on, well, now I need to get the 8 and 10 to connect with them, and so maybe the 7 and 11 are finishing on the pressure or something like that. But I've gone through the whole process. I analysed what I've seen at the weekend. I've identified a problem. I've worked on it realistically, not in a knee-jerk reaction, because that is a massive part of my game model. It's not just I said, oh, I can't finish. It's, I can't even get the ball to my 8 and 10 to get forward to connect, right? We haven't opened up the spaces. We haven't managed that space correctly. And then I've added in the shooting dimension at the end. So I would say that was a pretty successful extension of the game model into practice, based on some of the stuff I saw at the weekend. And if you can manage that, I mean, if you're, as a coach, if you can manage that every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, bottle it and tell me how. But, that's the ideal way, I think, isn't it? Maintaining your principles, but working on stuff that does also need to be addressed.
Completely. And I think a lot of coaches may have that, as you just said there, that knee-jerk reaction to, oh my goodness, we just lost and what we're doing is probably not right, so let's completely change it and let's address, for example, or address those shots, because that seems to be our weakness. And I think if you have this structure and this idea of what you are trying to achieve as a team, and you have specific player roles such as the 9 being the false 9, or your 7 and 11 driving inside and leaving space for your fullbacks outside, whatever that is, you are looking for that. Then you turn around and, like you said, you take that into practice, and the reward for doing those things are goals. We're going to have a goalie.
Yes.
We're going to have the goal there, and it doesn't have to be a separate practice. Like you said, it's there. It's part of the game. And it makes me laugh whenever you see a session where the defenders get the ball and the session just stops. Well, they've done their job. Thanks very much. And
Yes.
he's like, well, let's keep it game realistic then, because now we can address another moment if we want to, which is our transition from attack to defense. And whether you're focusing on that or not, you can still give them something that fits within your game model. If you want them to hit the wings, put smaller goals on the wings, then as soon as they win the ball, they bang the ball into those goals. That's a transition that we're looking to achieve. So I think the more this is why I love this conversation, because you create this 10,000-foot look of what you want your game to look like. And of course, kids are kids, and the game is the game, and nothing is predictable, and all sorts are going to happen, and maybe your goalkeeper doesn't come to the game for once, but you have this idea, your team will begin to have an understanding. And if you're in a position of influence, such as a director, as many full-time coaches are, you have this identified style, and if anything, you find yourself suiting the players within your organization too, because there is a trend within the club. Any player at any team really is looking to do X, Y, and Z throughout the club. The formation may change, and the intensity or the individual coach's perception of certain things will change, but for the most part, they are familiar within an environment and they have more chance of success.
That's a really interesting point, because we've appointed the director of methodology, a really great coach. I'll give him a shout out, a guy called Grant Knight, who, you'd love to have a conversation with him, Lee, as well at some point. He's away doing his UEFA B right now in Ireland, but when he gets back, one of the things we've identified is exactly what you just said. So our curriculum currently, our game model, curriculum and session plans run across the entire club. Now, as hard as that might be to process, is because it's more principle based, and it's like you said, it's not a playbook. So what we're asking now is, we're educating the coaches on the overall philosophy and methodology, and we're asking them to either, for want of a better phrase, dumb down or smarten up, depending on what age group they're working with. But the sessions are almost identical for every age group. We have like about 2% of the time we work on set plays, and that is literally as simple as defensive corners and free kicks and attacking corner and free kick, just so we don't kind of get completely embarrassed and undo all our hard work because some team lumps it into the box and we just stood there and watched. So as reluctant as we were, and honestly this was a discussion and a conversation and a decision that took weeks and weeks for us to agree on, because we didn't want to waste time of these young players working on set plays. We also felt that for the good of the club, we results sometimes sway where parents go, and if you've lost 5 games 1-0 because you outplayed a team, you had 80% of the ball, but then they kind of come down, they whack a corner in. Okay, so maybe we need to just know how to generally, zonally defend and attack corners. But apart from that, I can honestly say every session applies to every age group across our entire club. That's from U8 to U19, and it's just up to the coach and his nuance and his skill as a coach as to how he modifies that session to make it more or less relevant to the age group he's working with. But that was phase 1, and I've been here nearly a year now. Phase 2, we are going to slightly change that. So even though the philosophies will be the same across the club, and the movement, the scanning, the way you should move when the ball is, where one player has the ball and there's 3 attackers, where they should all kind of be, and the off the ball movement, all these kind of principles of play will stay the same. We are going to slightly split and modify our curriculum from like a U15 and up, and then a U14 and down. Whereas the U15 stuff, now that we're hiring stronger coaches all the time, and we're hiring stronger coaches, more importantly, that can execute our game model better. We're now starting to see, and it's already happened this year with another great coach, a guy who works with me called Dave Crowley, who works with our U11s and U12s. These guys are starting to dominate and have real good success with just simple tweaks. So this guy was already an amazing coach, but now we've given him that common core, right? That reference point. So now he's putting his amazing personality and his amazing ability as a coach, but focusing it and kind of in tandem doing it with our game model. His boys have just taken off. I mean, they're just beating all comers. So what we're expecting to happen now is the older coaches, when they receive these players from Dave Crowley, they're going to be ready. They're going to be out of the box, ready to go. That now we're going to work on more tactical, technical stuff rather than just technical stuff. So we've had all the positional plays, the rondos, the small-sided positional plays. They've learned all of this. They've learned how to pass and receive under pressure. We've done all the 1v1s, 2v1s, 2v2s, 2v2 plus 1, 3v2, so that they know how to go and beat players 1v1, 2v1. They know where the free man is. They know how to identify all of this. Now we're going to start giving them some slightly higher level tactics. I think anecdotally with my experience, what I've seen where I've been around, this is 100% the way to go, and only time will tell how it works out here. But already we're seeing huge benefits in how our players are performing, how our coaches are performing, because they're asking questions that they just wouldn't have asked before, because before it was just a bunch of coaches turning up and doing what they felt they needed to. Now it's kind of more structured and coherent. And lastly, which is pleasing but not the aim of it, but is pleasing, parents are starting to catch on, and word of mouth gets round that we are not a kick and chase club, but XYZ club up the road might be. So if I'm thinking about the long-term future of my child, well, I'm now a lot more likely to send them to you.
But you make a good point about Dave, that, and I don't know him, so I can't say this is true either way, but he could just be, and there are many coaches out there that I know and that are probably listening right now that maybe have no interest in writing that sort of material. Maybe they know what they're looking for, they know what they want from their game, and whilst we might encourage them to have this laid out, it's also a good time for them to reflect on what they really want and then find the environment that suits that. So Dave may be an awful director because he doesn't really like to tell people what to do, or he doesn't have this all written down, but he's found a niche within your organization that says, this is how we like to play. Can you coach that way, or does that suit your style? And I think back to what you said about you're attracting the right people. So you create this culture and this environment that is attractive to the right people. So you want people that want to play soccer. Well, you put it out there and you have the people in your organization, players, parents, coaches, all following along that same pathway. Now more people that enjoy the possession, more people that enjoy that style of play are going to be attracted to you. And clearly you're already hearing and reaping the benefits of creating that environment that everybody is happy and everybody is happy to be a part of.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to just clarify this, otherwise Dave's going to kill me when he listens to this. Dave is not an awful director. He's pretty damn good. No, the coaches as well. So you come to a club, and like any club, any company, there's people that are good at their job and there's people that struggle. I would say we have changed the balance of our coaching staff to the point where I would not change one of them out. And that took a lot of work on my part, and we have assistant directors coaching. So Dave Crowley, we've already mentioned, Grant Knight, who's the methodology guy, Nick Kinder, Shane Smith and Matt Schmidt have worked their backsides off, going into the community, contacting people, doing research, doing references, background checks, word of mouth, gossip, whatever you want to call it, to find people that fit with our DNA. And right now we're flourishing. Right now I'm growing as a coach. I'm really happy about that. Right now I've got coaches who work for me. I hate to say work for me. It sounds like I'm being, coaches that work at our club who are also growing and developing. I've got I'll give him a shout out. Mike McCormick, very experienced, very seasoned coach, but some of the questions and things he's posing to me and my assistant DOCs since we've kind of got this new drive going, the game model and the educational aspect of the club, which they didn't have as much before, it's just unbelievable. Like, the guy's asking real high-level questions, and I don't necessarily know that he was pushed to do that previously. He was just told, here, go coach these teams, good luck. All right? Same as most coaches up and down the country. There's not that level of micromanagement.
Let's wrap up, and I'm a coach listening to this. I've got a piece of paper in front of me. Where do I start?
So if you take learning materials out of the equation, right, and there's a ton of them, I won't list them all off, but a lot of stuff about tactical periodization for me opened the door on game models, and that's all I needed. Actually, I didn't even know a game model existed. I just didn't know what it was, and that sounds funny now, but you don't know anything until you're told, right, I guess. So if you're interested in finding out what game model is, I think a friend of mine, Brett Utley, did something on one of his blogs. You have to Google it. I can't remember the name of his blog, but I'm sure he touched on game models. Anything to do with tactical periodization, we'll explain it in depth. But for me, piece of paper, pen, starting from scratch. I always go back to that saying about the game is the teacher, and that saying gets a lot of bad criticism, because what a lot of lazy coaches do and have done, or old school coaches will say, well, we just learn by playing, right? And, they kind of diminish the role of any coaching in that, and that's not true. You can learn to play just by playing. You can also learn to play badly by just playing. Not every kid that has played futsal or every kid that was raised on the streets of Rio de Janeiro has made it through the ranks of professional players. But I would say watch your team and watch teams that you follow or like the style of on TV, and then start to break down, if you want to use the 4 moments of the game, okay, the in possession, out of possession, positive transition, negative transition. If you want to use those 4 moments of the game, try and analyse and identify how those teams operate in some of those moments. And very easy one to start with is playing out the back. Everyone talks about playing out the back now. If you ask someone their philosophy, they'll say, oh, it's possession-based and playing out the back. Okay, well, let's start with that then. How does your team, okay, for me it'd be Barcelona, watching them play, and they're not doing it as well nowadays. Let's say we're going back a few years under Luis Enrique or Pep. How do they do it? And there'll be a ton of variations on that, right? There'll be how do they play out the back if there's 1 player pressing, if there's no players pressing, if there's 2 players pressing. Have a little look at the movements and then just ask yourself, why? Why have they done that? It's not a case of monkey see, monkey do, and it can't be. It can never be that, because you'll never be able to figure out problems and issues and when things don't work properly. So what you have to identify is principles. So you might say, you know what, Barcelona, it looks to me if I draw a line and at some point I cut that third off and say everyone else above that line is not in that third. You know what it looks to me like? It looks like Barcelona trying to create a numerical advantage somewhere in there and find a free man and then get him to bring the ball into midfield. Okay, that's my first principle. When I'm playing out the back, I want to create a numbers up situation. I want to find 1 player who is relatively unopposed, right, the free man, and get that player to bring the ball out into midfield. That's your first principle of your game model right there. And then what you'll do is, over time, and believe me, it is a long process because I've done it and I continue to redo it all the time, you add many, many more principles in that one moment of the game. So you're in the moment of the game of possession, but then you've broken it down into build-up phase, right? Playing out the back. Then you might go, right, still in possession, right? So that's moment of the game, still in possession. Now I'm in the midfield. Still in possession, now I'm in the attacking third. And that's a lot of stuff to cover, right? A lot of variables in that. So you might want to get that down first. You might want to start with transitional moments. I'm a heavy believer that if you win a negative transition, so having the ball to losing the ball, if you win those moments, I think you have a very, very good chance of winning the game. If you win all your negative transitional moments and you disrupt the opposition doing that, you disrupt the opposition getting up to halfway cleanly, then you stand a very good chance of winning the game. And if you're winning the ball around their build-up third. They're playing out the back third. Then you're closer to goal to go again, and they're never really getting to rhythm, and you're always getting the ball in a good position to attack. Or maybe that then forces them to play long, right? So you start to, what happens when I do this? What if I press here and win the ball? What happens? Oh, they play direct. Well, I don't really have big centre backs. It's not the kind of centre backs I have. I'm more of a ball carrying technical centre back kind of coach. Maybe I don't want to press high. Maybe I want to sit back a little bit and let that happen. And you just go through all these stages of the moments of the game, right? So let's say you break the possession moment of the game, you break it into the 3/3 that we just talked about. In the defensive moment of the game, break them into 3/3 going the other way, and you just start to work on the what if. What if I move this player here? What if this shape, I change that? I'm a 4-3-3, but actually when I move up, I'm going to have my centre back bring it, and I'll be 3 at the back. I'm going to be 1 more in midfield. What does that look like? Do I like that? Yes, no, maybe. Or let's change it. And over time, you'll start to find things that suit you and your beliefs, and then you'll probably start coaching them. And then this is the frustrating bit, right? Once you've got your game model down, you think you're done forever. You put it away, you lock it up, but at the same time,
it's only when the work starts.
That's when the real work starts, because now there's your beliefs on paper and maybe a little bit of practical experience. Now I'm going to start coaching this, and how does it work? Did it go well because of the game model, or did it go well because I've got Messi in my midfield? Did it go wrong because of the game model, or did it go wrong because I've got Phil Neville in my midfield? Whatever you want to. All right. Have I got the player personnel, the player profiles? And at youth level, I'm not sure how important that is. At the elite level, academy level, high school level, maybe that is more relevant. College level, maybe that's more relevant. But it's all trial and error then, and it's like, okay, well, I started with 4-3-3. Everything I've done is based on that. But I actually think I want to play a 3 at the back. Well, now you've got to go back and rewrite everything. And that, I think, is after the trial and error period, right? Now I'm going to change it. I've got to go back. I've decided 3 at the back is how I want to go with wing backs. So I want to play like Man City now, control that ball nicely. And, well, who's got that time, Lee, to go back and do, you coaching your part-time second job? Honestly, mate, and that's, I think, a little bit of the commitment is how invested am I in this process? Or am I just a fair weather coach who means well, but my team's I'm really never going to develop hugely as a coach, and my team are never going to hit those real heights because I haven't got the time or I haven't got the commitment to keep continuously working and reworking on this stuff. And I think, honestly, at the end of the day, mate, that makes a massive, massive difference. If you think you're going to do it in one hit, sit down on a weekend and write a game model and that's it forever, you're going to be surprised when certain things don't work and you don't know why, and you haven't got the time to analyse or reflect. So you just do it all again next week, and you get lost. You get beat then as well.
Well, yeah, and to kind of go back to, there are people that are paid full time within clubs that are working hard to establish this game model, this curriculum, this style of play. And if you agree that you perhaps don't have, or you find yourself at a limitation when trying to work through this, or you're instantly overwhelmed, then you begin to have conversations and you find yourself in an environment that suits you, and then you begin to build off of that. I think the more people do that, regardless of the level that they're coaching, the more sense their practices are going to make, the more the players are going to enjoy it because they have a target and a way forward. And I was just in Kansas and I was talking to Greg Berhalter, just informally, just because that's what you do when you're in Kansas, just before they play, or just after they play Panama. And he said, like, he has his own game model, he has his own philosophy, he's looking for certain ways of the team playing. He said it's difficult when you're working at the international level because players are coming from other environments where they're told to play in different ways. So you look at Christian Pulisic coming in from Dortmund and now coming in from Chelsea. Now he's going to ask him to play in a different way or in a varied way because he's a different player within a different team. So then these players want to be told what to do. They know how to do it, but they like to be told how they can fit within this system, how they can help the team tick, how can they help pull together and achieve the goal of the game or of the tournament or whatever that is. And if international professional players are asking for that, we can only at least assume that our younger recreational or competitive players are also begging for the same information, right?
Oh, wow, that's a really powerful kind of point to wrap up on, mate. And I think any recreational coach or grassroots coach or youth coach listening to that should resonate with. You could be the nicest guy in the world, and it's no criticism of any coach, but if you're just turning up once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, and running a session, and there's no thought into it, or there's no explanation gone into the players over it, or there's no debrief, or there's no kind of post-session brief, what are you expecting them to go away with? Because there's no way that you get to touch upon every child's movement or position within that 90-minute, 75-minute session. So you need to start expounding principles and reasons behind what you're doing. And back to your point about if you had a piece of paper and a pen, if you had nothing more than one line in each of those 4 moments of the game, that would be a start, and that would be better than nothing. So if you said, in negative transition, our job is to try and win the ball back within 3 or 4 seconds. And if we can't do that, then we organise defensively, right? You've led straight into your defensive bit. In defence, we are going to organise ourselves in a 4-4-2. If we get beat, we're going to go into a 4-5-1. In possession, we're going to get big in a 4-3-3, stretch the field with width and depth. And then in positive transition, we'll play forward if we can. If we're going to look like we lose it, play backwards, take the pressure off and go. I mean, that's, 2 or 3 lines in each moment of the game. That would give your players some idea of how to organise themselves, what their roles and responsibilities are within that game. And then you just add to it as and when you're able to as a coach, and as and when your players are able to receive that as players, depending on how old they are on the level or whatever it is. But if you're saying that international players need guidance, well, sure as hell, then, youth players at my club and your club need guidance. And you're not going to get all that from 2 or 3 sessions a week. You're not going to get that if your coach doesn't open his mouth and give you some kind of briefing. Bring your players into the process. This is what I'm looking for, guys.
Let them understand, let them ask. And I'm glad we kind of finished on that. And that's the top of the game, and those players are still asking and still relying on that information on what the coach wants them to do. So if we're going to start anywhere, we're going to start with a piece of paper, and we're going to write down what we want our players to do in those moments, and then you just begin to work from there. And it's a constant craft. As you said, you're on multiple revisions of your own game model, and we should all really be along the same sort of pages where we are continuously tweaking and working with it. If you find yourself in an environment and you find yourself going against the grain because you just don't believe in it, you don't like the people, maybe you think that your way was better or the other guy was better before this new guy came in, that's also a cue for you to go and find an environment that is going to benefit you. Because if you are miserable, or if you're not having a good time, or you don't believe in that model, then that impacts everything you do, which then impacts all of your players, which then impacts all of their families. And this knock-on is just so negative, and you become viewed as a bad person, right? We don't want you around. So this is also a chance for you just to consider where you're at as an individual, and is that environment suitable to you? And if it is, then you give it everything you can. You just said there, this knock-on effect that affects so much more than just you and your team. And if it's not, now's the time to actually consider maybe finding somewhere new, or perhaps having an open mind and a growth mindset to change your belief, or at least fix your belief into what else is out there. So there it is. That's the overview of what the game model is and what we're really looking to introduce to everybody. Really, if you don't have this, then you can start with the 4 moments of the game and begin to identify what you are looking for within those 4 moments. We talked about incorporating players, and I recently asked my players, because I have my own game model and I have my own belief, have I ever told my players or showed them that on paper or in some classroom setting? No. So this was a learning experience for me that I have then begun by asking my players, what do we look to do, or what have I instructed you to do, or what do you think you need to do when you get the ball, or when you win the ball, or when we've lost the ball. So identifying it within those 4 moments, and what do they really see? Because that is helping me understand what they understand. Then the big picture, of course, if you are a director or if you have influence within an organization, now you're creating a culture that attracts the right people. You're able to say, this is the way we are playing throughout the club. This is our style of play. We provide this for our coaches if you're looking to recruit coaches that are coaching within your game model. But then you're also, as Paddy said, inviting and incorporating this family environment that people often complain about. You sit in a classroom, you hear people often complain about, oh, the parents. Well, it doesn't sound like Paddy's having that many problems, and I know other coaches who are in the same position because they have clearly defined structured game models that everybody can buy into. A huge thank you, as always, to Tactical Pad for their sponsorship. Their material is brilliant, and I use it so much with my players. So definitely head over to leadunsoccer.com and find out how to activate a membership with Tactical Pad. And then finally, keep up to date with me on Twitter at leadunsoccer. I've just released a new hashtag, not a new hashtag, of course, there are hashtags all the time, but a new method to my hashtag of hashtag practice coaching, where there will be mini clips of games, just in identified moments, and then it creates a discussion for coaches just to identify what they see and why they think it's happening, and then also why or what they will do in the next session and why. So imagine they have the team. So the first one I just did was the US. So how they played out against Curaçao, and then what that looks like for them in the next practice and how they might begin to adapt that. It's a safe space, it's an encompassing space, and I really want to encourage you to go and check that out and join us on there. Again, hashtag practice coaching. More coming from Heads and Volleys as always, and I'll speak to you very soon.